Fear is one of the oldest human experiences. It is older than language, older than memory, older than civilization. It was there in the beginning, in the dark caves, in the wilderness, in the storms, in the shadows. Fear is woven into the fabric of being human. It is not an enemy from the outside. It is a companion stitched into our bones. And for generations, people believed faith and fear were opposites, that one cancels the other. That faith removes fear, that fear proves a lack of faith. But that is not truth. That is not how the soul works. That is not how God works. Because faith was never meant to erase fear. Faith was meant to redefine it. Faith doesn't silence fear. It gives fear a new language. Faith doesn't kill fear. It transforms what fear means. Faith doesn't prevent fear from speaking. It teaches your heart how to answer. To have faith is not to feel fearless. It is to feel fear and move anyway. To walk anyway. To trust anyway. To trust anyway. To continue anyway. Fear says, stop. Faith says, go, even if you tremble. Fear was never proof of weakness. It was proof that your human people hide their fear as if it's shameful, as if fear is spiritual failure, as if trembling means you lack conviction, as if uncertainty means you lack trust. But fear is not weakness. Fear is awareness. Fear tells you that what you're facing matters. Fear tells you that you're stepping into unknown territory. Fear tells you you're being stretched. Fear tells you you're alive. Even the greatest prophets, leaders, warriors, saints, and heroes felt fear. Moses felt fear before Pharaoh. David felt fear before Goliath. Elijah felt fear when he ran for his life. Mary felt fear at the message she didn't expect. Even Jesus, in the garden, felt deep anguish. Fear does not disqualify you from faith. Fear positions you for faith. Because faith is only relevant when fear exists. Only courage in the presence of fear is courage. Only trust in the presence of uncertainty is trust. Only obedience in the presence of risk is obedience. Fear exists so faith can rise. Fear is a signal, not a master. Fear often tries to become your master. It demands control. It wants to dictate your choices. It wants to determine your path. It wants to shrink your life. But fear is not meant to be a master. Fear is meant to be a messenger. Fear tells you something is unfamiliar. Fear tells you something is bigger than you've handled. Fear tells you your comfort zone is being shaken. Fear tells you the outcome isn't guaranteed. But fear does not tell you to stop. Fear is meant to alert you, not imprison you. Faith doesn't remove fear because fear is useful. Faith redefines fear's role. Fear becomes a highlighter pointing to where growth begins. Fear becomes a map marking the borders of your old self. Fear becomes a teacher showing where trust must deepen. Fear doesn't lead anymore. Fear informs, but faith decides. Faith doesn't make the path easier. It makes the purpose clearer. People, imagine that when faith enters, the journey becomes smooth. That mountains flatten. That storms settle. That enemies disappear. That uncertainty dissolves. But faith does not eliminate difficulty. Faith clarifies meaning. Faith tells you, this path is hard, but holy. The storm is violent, but purposeful. The mountain is high, but worth climbing. The battle is intense, but winnable. The pain is real, but transformative. Faith does not promise the absence of fear. Faith promises that fear cannot determine your destiny. Fear says, this is dangerous. Faith says, this is destiny. Fear says, this will break you. Faith says, This will build you. Fear focuses on the threat. Faith focuses on the purpose. Faith redefines fear by redefining why you're afraid, not because danger is greater, but because calling is deeper. Faith doesn't tell you not to feel fear. It teaches you how to walk with it. People look at courageous individuals and assume bravery means no fear. But courage is not the absence of fear, is the correct placement of fear. Instead of fearing the unknown, you learn to fear missing your purpose. Instead of fearing the storm, you fear ignoring the voice that calls you through it. Instead of fearing opposition, you fear staying trapped in who you used to be. Faith gives fear a new target. Fear shifts from, "I'm afraid of what's ahead," to, "I'm afraid of never becoming who I'm meant to be." Fear becomes a compass, not a cage. Fear becomes fuel, not paralysis. Fear becomes a signal of direction, not danger. Faith turns fear into a guide. When faith rewrites fear, you stop worshipping control. Control is fear's favorite hiding place. Control pretends to be strength. Control pretends to be wisdom. Control pretends to be preparation. But control is fear wearing armor. Fear of failure leads to perfectionism. Fear of loss leads to suffocating. Gripped fear of unpredictability leads to obsessions. Fear of risk leads to stagnation. Fear of inadequacy leads to overworking. Faith steps in and asks you to release control, not as surrender to chaos, but as alignment with divine order. Faith teaches that you don't need to control everything because you are not alone in anything. You stop gripping outcomes. You stop forcing timelines. You stop manipulating situations. You stop panicking when things shift. Fear demands control. Faith trusts the process. Faith redefines fear by redirecting its energy from frantic grasping to grounded surrender. Fear shows your limitations. Faith shows your source. Fear is a mirror of your humanity. It shows your vulnerabilities, your wounds, your limits, your raw edges, your breakable places. But faith is a mirror of your divinely given strength. Faith shows you're supported, you're guided, you're equipped, you're strengthened, you're sustained, you're carried. Fear says you can't. Faith says you're not alone. Fear says you're too small. Faith says your source is bigger than you. Fear points to your weakness. Faith points to your provider. Fear reveals self-reliance is limited. Faith reveals divine reliance is limitless. When faith redefines fear, you no longer panic at your limits, you acknowledge them, then rise above them. Faith doesn't cancel fear, it gives fear context. Fear without context becomes panic. Fear without context becomes paralysis. Fear without context becomes distortion. But once faith enters, fear gains meaning. Fear becomes evidence that you're nearing breakthrough. Fear becomes proof that you're stepping into destiny. Fear becomes confirmation that the path matters. Faith does not change the reality of the situation. Faith changes the meaning of the situation. You don't stop feeling fear. You stop interpreting fear as danger and begin interpreting it as calling. Fear becomes confirmation, not condemnation. Faith doesn't remove uncertainty. It gives you stability, and it too cannot escape uncertainty. You cannot escape risk. You cannot escape the unknown. Life is built on things you cannot predict. But faith gives you stability within uncertainty. Fear sees uncertainty as threat. Faith sees uncertainty as invitation. Uncertainty becomes a place of discovery, a place of learning, a place of dependence, a place of growth, a place where miracles begin. Faith does not create clear roads. Faith creates clear hearts. With a clear heart, you can walk into unclear place without collapsing inside them. Faith replaces panic with perspective. Fear shouts. Faith whispers. Fear magnifies problems. Faith magnifies truth. Fear creates tunnel vision. Faith widens the horizon. Faith doesn't silence the voice of fear. Faith corrects its volume. Fear shouts, "This is the end." Faith whispers, "This is the beginning." Fear shouts, "You're trapped." Faith whispers, "You're transitioning." Fear shouts, "You'll fail." Faith whispers, "You'll grow." When faith redefines fear, perspective becomes your power. Fear will always tell you who you used to be. Faith tells you who you're becoming. Fear is tied to your past. It remembers every wound, every failure, every disappointment, every betrayal. Fear always looks backward, but faith looks forward. Faith is rooted in identity, not memory. Faith is rooted in promise, not history. Faith is rooted in potential, not limitation. Fear asks, "What if you go backward?" Faith asks, "What if you go beyond anything you've ever known?" Fear tries to anchor you to who you used to be. Faith anchors you to who you are becoming. Faith redefines fear by shifting the direction of your identity. Faith doesn't crush fear, it stands beside it. Many imagine faith as a force that obliterates fear, but faith is not aggressive. Faith is not violent. Faith does not silence fear by force. Faith stands beside fear. Fear says, "Look how dangerous this is." Faith says, "Look how guided you are." Fear says, "Look how uncertain the future is." Faith says, "Look how present your strength is." Fear says, "Look at the storm." Faith says, "Look at the one who calms storms." Faith does not overpower fear. Faith reframes fear. Faith doesn't remove the storm. Faith gives you the courage to walk through it differently. When faith redefines fear, you become unshakable, not because you don't feel fear, but because fear no longer controls you. You still tremble, but you move anyway. You still question, but you trust anyway. You still worry, but you walk anyway. You still feel weak, but you rise anyway. Faith doesn't create invulnerability. Faith creates resilience. Faith gives you the ability to stand even when the ground shakes. Faith redefines fear so deeply that fear becomes part of your strength, not part of your downfall. Fear will always exist, but its meaning is no longer the same. You will feel fear again. You will face unknowns again. You will encounter risk again. You will experience vulnerability again. But fear will not hold the same power. Fear will shift from obstacle to indicator, from enemy to messenger, from paralysis to motivation, from threat to threshold. Fear becomes the gate you walk through, the one that leads to purpose. Fear becomes the invitation, the one that calls you into growth. Fear becomes the signal, the one that reveals you're on the right path. Faith doesn't erase fear. Faith changes its definition forever. Faith doesn't remove fear, because fear was never the problem. Fear is not the enemy. Fear is the doorway. Fear is the signal. Fear is the place where faith becomes real. If faith removed fear, faith would be unnecessary. If faith silenced fear, faith would never grow. If faith eliminated fear, you would never stretch beyond what you already know. Faith holds your hand while fear stands in front of you. On together, they push you toward the life you were meant to live. Fear will speak, faith will answer. Fear will tremble, faith will steady. Fear will warn, Faith will lead because faith doesn't remove fear, it redefines it. And once fear is redefined, you become unstoppable.